Estamos allá afuera. Estamos en el frontline, ayudando a mantener este país andando. Estamos lejos de los que amamos y que ansían que regresemos a casa. Estamos aquí. Estamos optimistas. Estamos resistiendo. Estamos esperanzados. Estamos juntos. Esto es Estamos Unidos de América. Una nación unida donde la gente se ayude y que entiende que los que están allá afuera necesitan apoyo. No ganamos esto solos, lo ganamos juntos. P&G y Hispanic Star estamos contigo, ayudando a familias y a trabajadores esenciales, ayudando a los hispanos, ayudando a los Estados Unidos. Únete en hispanicstar.org.
Estamos unidos. Hispanos unidos, Latinos unidos. We are all in this together. Welcome on behalf of the P&G Alumni Network, whose mission is to create impact in our communities through engagement, enrichment, and philanthropy. Bienvenidos, bienvenidos, bienvenue. From California to Florida, Mexico to Europe, and Korea and Qatar, thank you for taking pause to reflect on the state of the Latinx community in America. As part of the community, as an ally, or as an American bystander or global citizen. At 60 million strong and nearly 20% of the population, there are tailwinds. Latinx businesses contribute $700 billion in sales annually to the US economy. Salsa is outselling ketchup, and Latin music is outstreaming country. But there are headwinds. The English-only movement, Latin history banned and erased, DACA, ICE, detention centers, and during COVID, stimulus relief withheld from couples with an undocumented spouse, Latinx dying 3 times more often, Latinx children catching COVID 8 times more often. So much of our community is on the front line, sacrificial yet essential workers. In fact, 1 out of 4 medical assistants, childcare workers, telecommunication installers and repairers is Hispanic. They are 20 times more likely to contract COVID. The community is experiencing a 20% unemployment rate, higher than any other racial or ethnic group. Half of Latinx families have a member who's lost their job. 25% of Latinx businesses are at risk of closing. Yet the community remains optimistic, 1.5 times more than the rest of America. Our cultural, economic, and political impact is undeniable in 2020 and in the 2020 election. So what are we going to do in this pause, this once-a-year Latinx Heritage Pause? We've gathered some folks to have a modern-day conversation on meeting the moment of what it means to be Latinx in America. From P&G's Chief Brand Officer to alumni to artists and activists. So thank you for zooming in to be presente and sin pena. I'm Gina Lam. I'm your host. I'm a 24-year veteran and P&G Alumni Board member for South Florida. I am an Asian Latina. I'm part of the third of the Latinx community that identifies as bicultural. My mom fled the 10-year civil war waged in the countryside of Colombia known as La Violencia, and Dad escaped the lead up to the Cultural Revolution in China. They met in New York City, and the rest is history. Those are my countries of origin. We are a nation of immigrants, so unless you're purely indigenous, we all have a story of how we arrived, whether for political, educational, economic, professional, or flight capital reasons. We've all made America our home and our beacon of hope and progress. It's one of the things that makes us extremely American and that we will pay homage to today in our moments of Latinidad. So let's see who else is in the room. Can I ask you guys to drop your cities in the chat? And while you're doing that, we've got something to sort out. Let's clear up some confusion. Is it Hispanic or is it Latino, Latina, Latinx? What's the difference? We use them interchangeably, but they're not. And the best way to do this is to pull up a map. Hispanic, here's the Hispanic map, is a term devised for census purposes in the 70s to categorize us as folks from Spanish-speaking countries. As you can see, Hispanics is a term that includes Spain, but it excludes Brazil and other parts of the Caribbean. Spanish was actually the first European language to be widely spoken in the US because the Spanish got here first, 50 years before the English arrived. So let's do something. Let's pull up a poll and let's see what we know about Spanish-speaking countries in the world and what the two largest Spanish-speaking countries are. And I'm going to ask Estrella HO-LOONEY, who's our chat leader, to go ahead and let us know what the results are and where we are at participation before we close that poll.
So go ahead and vote. Just the top two countries. And submit it, and let's see what comes in.
How well do we know our Spanish speakers in the world if we're talking about Hispanic?
And Yanis, is there a way to see that, the results coming in on the screen? And meanwhile, people who are calling in, thank you for calling in from Monica from Austin, Texas. And Neil Cumber. Hey, how you doing, Neil? I'm pretty sure he's in Cincinnati here. Michael Jones from Dallas. We got Harris Vogel from Atlanta.
Awesome. Awesome. Hearing the familiar names.
Yes, I know, but I still don't see the results. Here we go.
Yep.
Oh, I still don't see the results of the tabs.
So I'm seeing them, Estrella, so I can go ahead and let you know that actually we've got a smart group. They did pick out the two top. Mexico is the top Spanish-speaking country with about 120 million in their population. And number two, few people realize, is the US. And it looks like that one got some good scores too. So we got that right. Know that the US actually has 20 million more Spanish speakers than Spain. So while we're on the topic of language, let's also look at what percent of Latinx speak English. So in other words, the best of both worlds. So if we could pull up that poll. And Estrella, once again.
You'll see people coming in. It's actually kind of a tide. It looks like horses running right face to face in this one. Not a clear decision. So here we go. I believe right now we have 26 votes for around 26% for 65%, and second place close by 70%.
And the answer?
The answer is 70%.
That's right. So we need to up our knowledge here. It's 70%. So it's important to note now, while we're talking about Hispanic, that some people do consider the term offensive. They find it to be a nod to subjugation regarding our history of colonization, while others embrace the nod to ancestral roots. So again, Hispanic refers to folks tied to geography bound by a common language, which excludes neighboring countries. So if we switch maps now and we look at the Latino, Latina, Latinx, Latinx map, we're going to see here a geographic identifier of a region united by Latin-rooted languages. So not just Spanish, but Portuguese and French Caribbean, representing the diaspora of 25 some odd countries, islands, and territories. And the X, it's for gender inclusivity versus the masculine default of the language. It's a recent term from the last decade, which surged in usage post the Pulse massacre. It's especially embraced by scholars, activists, and Gen Z millennials as a fully inclusive term. So there you have it. I hope we've cleared that up for you. It's your choice how you choose to identify and when and what speaks to you. So now that we know who the beautiful mosaic is in the room, we're going to continue the conversation, and we're going to zoom over to our Beatriz Castillo, who is also with the South Florida P&G Alumni Board in Miami, and who's going to tell us her country of origin and introduce P&G's Chief Brand Officer. Beatriz?
Thank you, Gina. Hi, everyone. My name is Beatriz Castillo. I'm originally from Colombia. I worked with P&G for 14 years, the last 9 in the Latin American headquarters in Panama. I migrated here with my husband, who was transferred here with his company, Duracell, 3 years ago. And I've been living in South Florida, rediscovering what being a Latina means every time I show my ID or share my name, my very Latina name with 2 names and 2 last names, Beatriz Eugenia Castillo Lara. So I've been asked how many husbands I have, how many people I've married, And I have to say that only one, and I don't even use my husband's last name. So it's even more confusing. Latinx means to have a telenovela name and to carry our history in our names and our IDs with pride. As a forever marketer by trade, I have the honor and I'm delighted to introduce Procter & Gamble's Chief Brand Officer. Born in California, raised in Colorado, he has contributed 34 years of service to P&G with deep early roots in both the Americas and cosmetics. In his 12 years as CMO, he has made pivotal inroads in the diversity of P&G's advertising, including the award-winning campaigns, The Look and The Talk. Being a leading voice in the media, marketing, and creative industries, he believes in the power of brands to become a power of good, to change the social environment. He's here to tell us what Latinx is a priority at P&G and to share his own story. Marc Pritchard.
Gracias, Beatriz. And hola, everyone. It is a real honor and a privilege to spend time with you all here today. And I really am looking forward to at least sharing a bit of my story and a bit of what we're doing, as well as answering your questions and having a nice dialogue. I wish we could be there in person together, but maybe someday soon. So I want to start by reflecting a bit on what's happening in the world today, which Gina mentioned has had such a significant impact on the Latinx community. And I think what it says for me is that the events of 2020 have brought real clarity to what matters. The role of business in society has really been forever disrupted. It's now inescapably clear that we have a responsibility as brands and as companies to step up as both a force for good and a force for growth. And you can be very proud of how P&G and our brands have indeed stepped up. We established 3 priorities as we faced the pandemic. The first was to protect the safety of P&G people, because nothing is more important. Second, serve consumers around the world with our essential health, hygiene, and cleaning products that are needed now more than ever. And third, however possible, support communities in need, because they need our help and we have the means to help them. P&G heroes have been the frontline manufacturing and distribution workers who've been working around the clock to supply essential products as people rush to stock up. Our brands use their voices in advertising to be useful. They've created how-to content such as sanitizing surfaces, shaving for a better mask fit, skincare after wearing a mask all day, even cutting hair at home and using less to avoid running out. We offered free laundry services for frontline responders and virtual childbirth classes for parents. We've also ramped up our efforts to help communities by expanding our existing disaster relief operations that are typically used for hurricanes and tornadoes and wildfires. We expanded them through 200 relief organizations to donate tens of millions of dollars worth of products, cash, and personal protective equipment to families in hard-hit cities, towns, and villages all around the world. And we use our voice as a company with public service campaigns to encourage hand sanitizing, social distancing, and mask wearing. The focus has been on how to help, because being a force for good is about being useful. Now, at the same time, the focus has been on delivering superior business results, because being a force for growth is about creating value and is absolutely essential to having the means to help others on a sustained basis. Now, this point is really important and why we always characterize our efforts as both a force for good and a force for growth. Because being a force for good without growth is philanthropy. And there's nothing wrong with philanthropy, but P&G is not a nonprofit charity, and we're ultimately accountable to shareholders who own our company, like you. Being a force for growth without doing any good for society is increasingly viewed by consumers as mercenary. So doing good needs to also lead to driving growth, and driving growth then in turn enables doing more good, which creates a virtuous cycle that's sustainable. Now, this notion is built into our statement of purpose, which we're all familiar with. Notice the last phrase, allowing our people, our shareholders, and the communities in which we live and work to prosper. P&G brands reach 5 billion people every day, from the biggest cities to the most remote villages. We ship products to 100,000 retailers. We work with 64,000 suppliers. Our reach is wide and deep, so it's important that we care about the consumers we serve, the 99,000 employees of our company, the shareholders who own our company and expect us to create value, and for the communities where people live and work. In fact, it was William Cooper Procter who created the community chest to help underprivileged people in Cincinnati get back on our feet. Doing good while doing well is in P&G's DNA. It's part of who we are. Now today we've chosen what we call our citizenship priorities in areas where we believe P&G can have the greatest sustained impact on doing good and driving growth. Ethics and responsibility is the foundation. It includes safety, quality, integrity, and good governance. Community impact supports communities in need with clean water and essential cleaning, health, and hygiene products that we donate. Environmental sustainability enables and inspires positive impact on the environment while also creating value for consumers and brands through what we like to call responsible consumption. And equality and inclusion focuses on achieving an equal world that embraces the individuality and unique contributions of all people and unites us all to create a better world where everyone thrives, where business grows, and where communities prosper. And we've made a deliberate choice for these citizenship priorities to be built into how we operate and conduct our business, not bolted on as a separate effort or work or activities. Our intent is to make these efforts part of our winning strategies. So we help widen our advantages across all of the vectors of superiority like product and packaging communication, improve productivity, strengthen our organization, and lead what we call constructive disruption across the value chain. Now, because of this choice, we're building equality and inclusion into how we build our brands. And that includes efforts for the Latinx community. We want to be the best company for Latinx employees, and we want to provide the best brands for Latinx consumers. Now, in addition to being the right thing for society, it's also the smart thing to do for business. As Gina mentioned, there are more than 60 million Latinx citizens in the United States, representing more than 18% of the population. It continues to be one of the fastest growing demographics and represents more than $2.3 trillion of economic power. That's good news for P&G's business. And the better news is that our market share among Latinx consumers is strong, with 17 of our top 22 brands in the US holding the #1 or the #2 share position, with nearly half of those 22 brands overdeveloped versus the national average. Building our business with Latinx consumers is good for business. But there's more that we can do. There's no reason why we shouldn't be overdeveloped among all of our brands. We think we could add another $500 million a year in extra sales in our US business just by getting our fair share of market growth. And here's a few ways we're stepping up as both a force for good and a force for growth to be the best for Latinx employees and best brands for Latinx consumers. Now, first, we're striving to achieve equal representation in what we call the creative and media supply chain. And what is that? Well, the creative and media supply chain includes marketers, agencies, commercial production crews, and media providers like NBC, ABC, CBS, Telemundo, Univision, and so forth that create, distribute, and monetize advertising programs and content. This is where value is created in the marketing industry. And this aspiration means that at every link in the chain, at every level, we have equal gender representation, 50% women, 50% men, and representation of race and ethnicity that's equal to the population of the US, which is at least 18% Latinx and growing rapidly. Now, equal representation leads to greater creativity and innovation. It builds access to opportunity, and it leads to equity in income and wealth creation. That leads to purchasing power, which leads to market growth, which is important for P&G strategy. Now, as a company, we've nearly achieved our aspiration of gender equality in management. We have 48% women managers, and we're at 9% Latinx representation in management. We're at 8% at the board level and 15% Latinx management and our most senior managers, so solid representation. Within brand management, which I'm responsible for, we have more than 50% representation of women at every level, and our Latinx representation is at 10%. So not bad, but since the population is 18%, we clearly have some more work to do. And that's why we're continually making interventions across the entire talent management ecosystem, ensuring high levels of recruiting, strong development, placing top talent into challenging roles, and making interventions to increase retention. Now, outside of our walls, we also choose to work with suppliers who have diverse workforces. And we can't dictate who they hire, but P&G preferred suppliers are those who advance equality. Our agency partners have made strong progress with women, well above 50%. But Latinx representation is only at 8%. In commercial production crews, we don't even have the data on Latinx commercial production directors, but we know it's low, so we clearly have more work to do. And while we don't yet have the data on media providers, the leaders of those providers have committed to measure, diagnose, and act. Now, all of this is hard work, and we will not stop until we achieve equal representation in every link of the media and creative supply chain. Now, second, we're using our voice to promote equality through the accurate portrayal of all people in advertising and media. Equality is limited by bias, and the portrayals of people in advertising embed memories into our brains that form bias, whether that be positive or negative. Ads affect perceptions of how people see each other and how they see themselves. And studies show that accurate portrayal leads to up to a 10% increase in trust ratings and a 25% increase in purchase intent. So as the world's largest advertiser, we strive to accurately portray all people across gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation and gender identity, ability, religion, and age. And that includes Latinx people. And here's a few examples from some of our P&G brands.
For the moms who taught us to never sweat our critics.
For the sisters who showed us that having feelings isn't a sign of weakness.
For the grandmothers who pushed us to speak up for ourselves.
To every woman who has had a child, lost a child, adopted a child, raised a child, or raised them up, you teach us what not to sweat so we can show the world our strength. Secret. All strength, no sweat.
El más apasionado por el fútbol lo tengo en casa. No es mi hijo, es su padre. Cada partido se termina manchando. Salsas, refrescos, queso.
No, mi amor, son goles.
Desde que encontré Tide Pods que remueve más de 100 manchas en una lavada, la única que la pasa relajada soy yo.
¡Gol, gol, gol!
De tal palo, tal astilla.
Trata mejor tu ropa con Tide Pods con Downy. Limpia y acondiciona en un paso. Tiene que ser Tide.
Esta crema es not my mama's cream. Es muchísimo más liviana que esas cremas that I used to sneak around and play with de mi mamá. Y deja mi piel feeling even smoother than hers. Este whip de Olay es mi secreto to keeping great looking skin en la familia.
So as you can imagine, we measure our advertising to ensure the accurate and relevant portrayal of Latinx people. We have several ways that we measure, including an industry measure called the Cultural Insights Impact Measure, or CIM. Now, these ads tested in the top quartile of the CIM database, indicating that they are highly accurate, culturally relevant, and have high potential for strong sales growth. In fact, that Olay ad that you just saw, the last ad, grew sales by an extra 5 to 6% in both Miami and Houston when they ran the ad. We want more of this kind of advertising. But we're also pushing the TV media broadcasters to improve representation and portrayal of the Latinx community in programming. Only 5% of TV characters are Latinx, compared to 18% of the population. And not one was nominated for an Emmy this year. And too often, Latinos and Latinas are stereotyped, diminished, objectified, or denigrated. So P&G recently joined forces with the Association of National Advertisers, Alliance for Inclusive and Multicultural Marketing. And P&G funded the development of a public service announcement that we ran during the Emmys to press the TV industry to step up and see the Latinx community as they are, along with the Black and Asian communities too. Here it is.
We are here. We are here. We are here.
We appreciate the dialogue.
We see the effort from Hollywood, but we need more.
We are here.
We've been here.
And in the morning, if I'm blessed to possess breath,
I will still be here.
But do you see me in this industry?
You act as if bias doesn't exist.
Would you rather breathe life into stereotypes?
Or stand up against them?
Because what I know of my culture
isn't who you portray me to be.
So show me.
All of me.
Not just who you written me to be.
See me.
We are more than a splash of color on your white canvas.
Hear me.
We're not your quota.
We are quotable.
Show me me.
Not your me. Me.
I am not asking.
And nor am I leaving.
We've been here.
But don't just see us.
Stand with A&A's aim.
Let us come together so that we can create waves of change.
It's time to see all.
So, pretty hard hitting. We're the world's largest advertiser, and the images in advertising and media matter. So we're stepping up to use our voice to promote the representation and the accurate portrayal of Latinx people in our ads and in our media programming. Now, third, we periodically take a stand in our advertising to eliminate bias and racism and to promote equality. For example, you've probably seen what we've done for gender equality. The Always brand literally changed the meaning of the phrase, like a girl, with 76% of people now thinking that it's a positive expression versus only 19% before. Now, multiple brands have also taken stands on gender equality, such as Olay's Face Anything that shatters gender myths. SK2's Change Destiny that challenges gender expectations that hold women back. And Secret's All Strength No Sweat campaign showing that women have a lot of things they may sweat, but one of them shouldn't be equality. You've also seen the work that we've done for the Black community with the talk, the look, and the choice. It shines the light on the realities of being Black in America. And we don't spend a lot of our marketing dollars on these thought-provoking ads, but they have an outsized impact because they're insightful films involving relevant issues that people care about. And they spark conversations, which is our intent. Because conversation leads to understanding. Understanding leads to empathy. Empathy leads to changes in mindset. And a change in mindset can lead to action. And here's a spot we recently developed to address the challenges facing the Latinx community during the COVID crisis. You saw the Spanish version, here's the English version.
Estamos out there. Estamos on the front line helping to keep this country going. Estamos away from the ones we love who can't wait for us to come home. Estamos aquí. Estamos optimistic. Estamos resilient. Estamos hopeful. Estamos together. This is Estamos Unidos de América, a nation united by people who help each other and understand that those who put themselves out there need support. We don't win this alone. We win this together. That's why P&G and Hispanic Star Estamos with you, providing relief for families in need and essential workers, helping Hispanics, helping Estamos Unidos.
That was created with the Alma agency for the Altissimo and the Dolores Huerta 90th birthday benefit events. It also helped launch the Hispanic Star movement. And you're going to see it on the October 26th, Essential Heroes, a Momento Latino event on CBS, helping the 80% of US Hispanic adults who have jobs outside of their homes. Now, this effort was personal because my father, who was Mexican American and worked in a hospital, used to take me to migrant farm worker towns in Colorado to provide healthcare services. Decades later, there are still no healthcare systems for far too many Latinx families, but we're uniting the Latinx community around the country to step up and help. And I want to show you another ad we developed and ran a few years ago during Hispanic Heritage Month that takes on one of the most insidious forms of bias, labels.
Marc.
Mira, te podría decir una lista larguísima de todo lo que nos dicen, ¿no?
El jardinero, ser un naco.
Yo creo que beaners, frijoleros.
Narco.
Usualmente nos dicen que somos mojados.
No me gusta cuando me dicen que todos nosotros, cubanos, somos balseros. Lo primero que me vino a la cabeza es que esto es un insulto para los cubanos.
De alguna manera es lo que piensa mucha gente.
Estar etiquetando gente es, vaya, algo tan bajo realmente que...
Entonces, claro que me gustaría borrarlo. Sería un gran comienzo.
Todos somos iguales y que no hay que poner labels a la gente.
Que los mexicanos somos, de verdad, gente de trabajo.
Sin etiquetas, sin prejuicios.
Las únicas etiquetas que existan sean así, las positivas, las que sí son de verdad.
And that was a powerful ad that generated millions of impressions in social media conversations. It also affected me personally, and still does, since I'm half Mexican. Although my father was Mexican, he was adopted by a man with an English name, Pritchard. Growing up, I could move between Latino and white cultures. But entering the workforce, I suppressed my Mexican heritage, keeping it hidden for fear of being labeled, because I had heard these denigrating terms used many times in my life. So this ad hit home, and I came to grips with my own biases to change my own attitudes and behavior. I recognized the advantages or even the privileges of being viewed as a white man. It's not lost on me what that's meant. My dad's real father was named Gonzalez. My parents had a good friend named Mick, and it was a name that they considered for me. So think about the difference of growing up Mickey Gonzalez versus Marc Pritchard. I remembered that my dear dad reinforced biases, all in an effort to protect me. For example, when I applied for a job, there's a place to specify race or ethnicity, Caucasian or Latino. What should I mark, Dad? Well, my dad said, you mark Caucasian. Otherwise, you may be judged differently and have trouble getting a good job. There were situations at work. Early in my career, I worked for several senior managers who used to call me Young Marc. During a performance review, my boss brought it up. I asked what to do about it, and he said, well, there's not a lot you can do, but you might want to avoid getting too dark a tan. It brought back a memory of my dad, who once said the same thing about himself, that he often avoided the sun to keep from getting too dark. Now, as I reflected on these points, I realized my own bias, and I had to unlearn many of them. I decided to share my story publicly, internally at P&G and externally at an industry event. For the first time in 35 years, proudly and publicly sharing my Mexican heritage. It was quite an emotional moment, but it made it clear that when leaders step up to talk about tough issues like bias, it gives others the emotional safety to talk, change attitudes, and change behavior, and really go ahead and be themselves. And this moment made me realize the deep and passionate commitment that I have when it comes to equality and inclusion, and to help all communities, especially the Latinx community, in whatever way I possibly can, just like my dad used to do. I'm blessed with many privileges, including working for P&G with some of the most amazing people in the world and tremendous partners, all of who are willing to step up. So my call to action is for all of us to step up, to help achieve equality and inclusion for the Latinx community with the steps I outlined, achieving equal representation throughout the creative and media supply chain and any supply chain you may be involved with, using your voice in advertising or any form of communication that you have access to as a force for good by portraying people as they are, and periodically using your voice to take a stand to eliminate bias and racism and advance equality. And finally, it's a blessing to have the privilege of opportunities like this one today with all of you, our wonderful Latinx P&G alumni, allies, fellow Americans, and global citizens, to share my story and to share what we're doing in hopes that it'll be useful to each and every one of you in some small way. Estoy presente y sin pena. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Marc, for sharing your family story, your heritage, and your defining moments of Latinidad, as well as for taking us through P&G's commitment to the Latinx community. We're going to go ahead and open up to some questions. The first one has to do with this story of Latinidad. We have seen the stat that 76% of the community, the Latinx community, have at some point pretended to be someone else. We do have passing privilege. We come in all colors in the Latinx community. And so a question for you is, what did you observe about the Latinx bias during your career, which solidified not sharing your story any sooner?
Well, you know, a lot of the things that I observed were during my life was, as I mentioned, the labels that I heard many times. I also, you know, I grew up in the 60s and the 70s, so I saw violence. I mean, I saw, you know, growing up in Denver, Colorado, there was a very heavily what we call Chicano community. So we saw situations, and my dad talked to me about situations where there was violence because of the bias and the racism that occurred. My observations, though, were not necessarily directly against Latinos or Latinas. It was just more a culture of sameness, a very Caucasian culture, a very, you know, this is the way we do things, and it's just it's a rigidity to it, and that's one of the things that can happen in cultures, and I think it's one of the things that has changed dramatically in P&G over the course of my career, which is now 38 years. Is at first it was pretty much one way, and it was very white and it was very male, and so that my fear then was there was going to be an intolerance for difference. And that was, and some of that I just observed in terms of just basic expectations. You know, I probably heard comments made over time. I mean, even as I mentioned, the one manager who said, you know, you might want to not get too dark a tan. That was kind of a, ooh, wow, you're pretty much saying I can't show my Mexican heritage. And it linked back to exactly to what my father said, where he would say, look, I gotta avoid getting too dark, or I'll and looking too Mexican is the way he said that, which is, I look back on that now and I think, wow. So that's it. Some of it is just fear, you know, and that's part of the reason why I came out and expressed my story, because I wanted to open that up for people. I wanted people to be able to say, no, we're going to talk about this. We're going to have conversations about this, because everybody deserves to be themselves. And when you can do that, you can bring your whole self to work, and it makes such a difference.
Speaking of bringing your whole self to work, the next question is really around the Latinx employee at the company, and a question around how P&G, what P&G has found to be critical in staying in an authentic relationship with the P&G employee, Latinx employee. There is this commentary around that the numbers for inclusion are similar to what they were in the 90s. and what P&G may be doing differently today, and whether or not meeting equity and inclusion goals are still part of management compensation.
Well, one of the things I can say about what we're doing now is we just literally declared a very specific statement that we wanted both 50-50 women and men, and then we wanted race and ethnicity to reflect the US population. So that would be a total of 40%, as I mentioned, but that needs to be 13% Black, 18% Latinx, 6% Asian Pacific, 2% Native American, and then 1 or 2% or more of multiple races. So as I mentioned, we're 9-10% of Latinx. So we've got some work to do. And it's a strong representation, relatively speaking, but it doesn't yet reflect the full population. So what we're doing now is, what that means is going back and we're looking at our recruiting, to make sure we recruit enough, making sure that we do enough on development. We've isolated places where there's some attrition issues. A lot of times it'll happen at the younger levels, and making interventions. The other thing we're doing is more openly celebrating, really celebrating the Latinx community. So, I just last week had a major Hispanic Heritage Month celebration. And we had Claudia Edelman, who helped found the Hispanic Star there. And we had this great panel with Janet Margulia, who is Unidos US leader, as well as Claudia and John Leguizamo, who was also there. So it was amazing. Estamos Unidos gave us the chance to engage all employees on the Altísimo benefit, the Dolores Huerta benefit. So doing those kinds of things. We also have something every year called Latinovation, which is a celebration, which you may be familiar with, where a celebration of all the innovations that are coming from the Latina community. So that's building that out. I'm Mexican American, but I'm also the leader of the African American Leadership Network, and we have done very similar activities where we've created these basically drumbeat for the entire year of activities we're doing. We're doing the same thing with our Latinx community, and I think that will help advance even further because it'll create even more of a network and a feeling of belonging and a feeling of being part of something bigger.
Speaking of the great positions that P&G has taken in the industry, one of the questions is around the P&G communications during driving diversity, equality, and inclusion across the brands and in the advertising industry are best in class. How did the company get over the fear of the backlash that inevitably comes with those who don't support, and how does the organization handle that backlash?
It is a great question because it's one that we really stepped out on this. Talk, the look, the choice, Estamos Unidos, labels, even Gillette We Believe, which is another one, several other things. The way we've gotten over that is because what we've done is we've recognized, number one, consumers want to know what brands believe in. 9 out of 10 consumers now believe that they have a better feeling about a brand if it supports a social or environmental cause. More than half of consumers, in fact, now like 70% of Gen X consumers expect brands to take a stand. I mean, that was really prevalent during this, that has been prevalent during 2020 with the issues that have occurred. So that's one thing, consumers expect it. The second thing is we find insights that matter and that our brand or our companies could have a voice in, could actually say something about that. And so these insights are real and they're important and they're poignant. And then they get people to start conversations. And those conversations are not only inside our walls, but they're also outside. And then because what that can do is then it can have conversations that can eventually eliminate bias. We eliminate bias, we get equality. We get equality, we get economic equality. And that's good for business. So all that is to say, how do we get there? Then when we take heat, which we have, by the way. We've taken significant heat for some of these points of view. Then we have conviction, because we know we're doing it for the right reasons, and because it's P&G, we do the right thing. And when we do the right thing, we are willing to take some extra heat. And I'm glad we've done that, because it's really paid off. It's allowed us to, I mean, even as we entered this year, the activities that we did, our people shined the light on them, but we've been doing them. So it wasn't like we just started during, first of all, the COVID crisis, and then the racial crisis. And then as we go on with starting the Hispanic Star and those activities, we have credibility in them because we've been at them for a while.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of that credibility, what we saw after the George Floyd murder is that there was a surge around the Black Lives Matter movement and the dialogue that needs to happen in this country. We saw a lot of companies taking a stand and really reviewing their portfolios in different ways, right? And how they show up in the industry, but also their product portfolios. The question here is around, have we done that kind of work to review our P&G portfolio? If there are any undertones of racism involved here and all over the world, because it's in stages, right? How our portfolio shows up. And have we made any moves there in cleaning up, how we show up in the world?
First thing we did immediately was we looked at all of our advertising to make sure that our advertising was accurate, as well as reflecting cultures and reflecting people as they really are. We have actually gone through all of our products, and we're going through all of our products. And there are some products actually that may be perceived as having, because of the benefit that they provide, is having a name that just might not be exactly perceived in the right way. So we're actually working on that right now. I mean, we're actually working at what we need to do on that. So we're very aware of each of those things and taking a really complete review of everything that we're doing, and that's the world we live in. And I'm glad of that, because we never want to say something that might be offensive to somebody, even if it was completely unintended.
Absolutely. So we've got one last question here around how do you get other companies to follow, right? P&G is so good at doing the right thing and being one of the first ones to get out there and do what's right, right? And yet, as we mentioned before, there's risk. But how do you create a movement out of it while still being a corporation that needs to abide by those parameters?
Yeah, the thing about P&G is we do have some convening power in that people look at our company, and because we do the right thing, because we have our purpose, values, and principles, and we live those purpose, values, and principles, and we walk the talk. And in fact, many times we just do the right thing and we don't talk about it at all. We've been talking about that for the last 6 months. It's about action, not headlines. And so, but we have opportunities to convene and bring people together. I'm actually the chair of the Association of National Advertisers. And within that, there are two organizations. One is the #SeeHer movement that focuses on the accurate portrayal of women and girls. And the second is the Alliance for Inclusive and Multicultural Marketing, which, as you saw, what we did for the Emmys, we created that. So those two organizations we're a major part of. I'm on vice chair on one, and I'm on the advisory committee for the other. And then I'm leading a more than 300 CMOs, chief marketing officers, to actually do the same thing. So the things that I just described in that talk, I'm really pushing and inviting others to join. So, and it makes a difference, because when people can see a company like P&G step up and take action, they look and see how they can do that as well. And what we also do is provide, openly our roadmap and how we're doing things, and it makes a difference. So we will continue to do that, and that's because I really believe that the business In fact, back more than 20 years ago, I was on a little retreat with my wife, Betsy, and our 3 daughters, and my dad, as a matter of fact. And it was a spiritual retreat. And the leader of the retreat came up to me at the end of the week, and he said, "You know what? Business will someday be the greatest force for good in the future. If you choose to do so, you can do a lot of good." It was this blinding moment of clarity, and I realized, aha, and here we are now, more than 20 years later, and I realized business can be the greatest force for good in the future, particularly when you also are a force for growth, because then it allows it to be a virtuous cycle. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the future, and I certainly hope that we as P&G will be in the lead on that.
Well, thank you for that leadership, Marc, and thank you for the moments of humanity that you have shared with us and opening up about your story so that others can do the same with their story. So thank you for meeting the moments, for being presente and sin pena.
Okay, gracias. Thank you. Bye-bye. Hope to see you all in person soon. Bye-bye.
Mirad, podéis ver al sutil clarear lo que erguido se alzó cuando el sol se ocultaba y sus franjas y estrellas en el rudo luchar sobre recio baluarte gallardo ondulaba y la bomba lanzar su rojiza explosión en la noche dio a ver que allí estaba el pendón estrellado, tremola feliz en la tierra del valor, el libre país.
Commissioned in 1945 by then U.S. President Roosevelt. This is the Spanish version of the U.S. national anthem. Whether you are American or a global citizen, this melody tugs at various emotions, reminding us that we can still do mucho to recognize a community that moves the U.S. forward. My name is Sandra Ruiz, twice a P&G alum. Yes, that's possible. First, from the US Sales Organization, where I pioneered the Hispanic Marketing Initiative on the Walmart Global Customer Team. Then in Western Europe Human Resources, where I led the people part of several M&A deals. Today, I'm an executive coach for global professionals who are looking to deepen their inclusive leadership from the inside out. And this evening, morning, afternoon, I'll be tending to the alumni stories of Latinidad, stories with corazón y coraje, courage and heart, stories that refresh our mindset about Latinx in America. So let's meet the moment and let's meet our courageous storytellers. Today we have Diana BRICEño, CEO of No BS Skincare, who joins us from Miami. We also have Estrella HO-LOONEY, Senior Director and Insight Strategist at Illuminations Research in Cincinnati. And Javier Karasari, Sales and Marketing Executive for Coty Inc., previously New York, now Miami. And I need to give a special shout out to someone who is presente in spirit, Rick De Leon. Carlos Cojolum, you had mentioned that you were excited to see him. He has been the spirit of so much of what P&G Latinidad has been about. And with whom, in 1996, and with you, Carlos, we co-founded the P&G Corporate Hispanic Steering Team, unifying the Latino support groups and creating a unified voice to the leadership who was tapping into this talent. Rick, we know you're meeting a defining moment for La Familia de Leon, and we say presente and sin pena with you. Your leadership for Latinidad is an inspiration to generations of P&Gers. So let's get ready to listen. Let's all create that space that Marc talked about, a safe space to explore the kaleidoscope of Latinx in America. Diana, do we have you on screen? Hi. Great. Diana, how about we start with you? Would you briefly share with us your countries of origin and how you arrived into the US, or how the US arrived to you?
Yes, hi, my name is Diana BRICEñO, and my story actually starts here in the US. My grandmother was born and raised in Syracuse. She met my grandfather, who is Venezuelan, when he was studying college in Syracuse. They got married, moved back to Venezuela, which is where my mom was born. On my dad's side, they're all Venezuelan. I was born and raised in Venezuela, went to college there. I started in P&G in Venezuela as well. And when things started getting really difficult, my family moved to the US. I was already at P&G, and I came with P&G as a local, and I actually became, well, first a permanent resident and then an American citizen because of the P&G, I guess, sponsorship program. If it was because of my family heritage, I think I would still be waiting and split from my family. But now I'm super proud to be Venezuelan and American.
Wow. So the country came to you, you came to the country, the borders moved around, as did you. Thanks. Estrella, how about you?
Yes, Sandra. So I am Panamanian, born and raised in Panama from Chinese and Spaniard immigrants. And then I immigrated myself as a young adult here to the US for college. And it's really interesting because actually the way I started in the US is I got a work visa. Like very few students even had a job. And I was very, fortunate that the company sponsored my visa. But it was really interesting because I was a female engineer. And most of the places that I work was rural America. And as much as I love the US and everything else, I'll tell you, I could really relate to Marc's stories. A little bit of, some awkward moments there. Estrella is an awkward name that you couldn't pronounce in English, even though it's beautiful in Spanish. I mean, star. It was just different. You really have to stand up for yourself sometimes.
Wow. That's a courageous and interesting story. And Javier, has this happened to you?
Hi, how are you? Sorry about
the
video was working. Now it's a little iffy in the background. My story. So, hey, everybody, my name is Javier Karasari. I was in P&G for about 8 years. I came through the acquisition of the Art of Shaving, and then I left when Coty took over the prestige brand of Procter. But I was born in Argentina. I came to the US when I was 12. I came with, obviously, my family. At 12 years old, you don't have much of a say whether you want to come or not. I did not want to come. I did not want to come at all. But again, 12 years old, from Argentina, both my parents are Argentinian. They came here as most immigrants do, looking for a better future for me and my sister. and they had a little bit of a rough time with the Argentinian crisis in 94, 95. So that's how I landed in this Estados Unidos that we all love now. I have to say, I did not love it when I first moved here.
What adolescent does love what mom and dad ask them to do, or what mommy and papi le piden?
Absolutely. But now I cannot thank them enough, and I cannot be more proud of them for bringing me here and allowing me to succeed, which I would have never been able to do.
So that's interesting that you say that, Javier. There are moments that define identity, and maybe these moments that your parents asked you to live at 12 were one of them. Sometimes there are others where we are coded and identity is assigned to us. So let's move in, and I'm going to stay with you, Javier, about living in the US. Was there a moment that marked your Latinidad?
So yes, multiple moments, I would say.
Multiple moments. Well, we're going to ask you to start with one.
So
we're curious about Diana and Estrella.
So let's see. So when I first started school, so I came when I was 12. No English whatsoever.
Nada.
I mean, you know, the basic red, blue, under, over.
Azul, rojo.
That's it.
Yeah.
So when I came to start school here, immediately the school system here puts you in a little bubble, in like an outsider field, because when you don't speak, when you're starting school in the US, you're put into the ESL program, which is basically you have a buddy, an English speaking buddy that takes you through your classes.
The English as the second language program.
So right off the bat, as soon as you start school here, you already feel different. So you're already classified as you're not the same. So that was
labels.
That was like the first label, which you don't even know about. It's just how it works, right? And between
so those are moments where maybe we're coded and we don't even know it, and we're walking around with one identity. Yeah, that's not an easy thing. Is this an experience, Estrella, that you've had?
Definitely. Like what I mentioned with my name, means Estrella, and Australia, Estrella, it doesn't matter if people try, right? So, but that was just a little thing of how I left my identity a little bit being here. But I think it was more than that. So with my story, like as an engineer and working, rural America and everything, a little bit of Javier was saying, like, I was really following my dreams, and I was just really going for what I thought I was right and fighting. And we're all P&Gers, and we really fight for what we want, and we sometimes don't see stuff. And here I was busy doing all my stuff, and I think my real moment of Latinidad for me was actually at P&G. I was very lucky. Very early in my career, I was part of the MBDO, and shout out for all those MBDO people, the Multicultural Business Organization.
Hey. We met there.
Yes, and it was actually a quite fascinating idea, because I was charged to define the U.S. Latina. Who was the U.S. Latina shopper? And as good P&Gers, we don't only just hear people what they say, but we try to go deep into their emotionals, deep into their subconscious, and really understand what makes a Latina. And as I was hearing the stories from market after market that we would go, and this like first imprint of what made them, who they were, I started realizing that I was the same as them. And the big insight in that research was the US, as a US Latina, you have one foot in Latin America and one foot in the US. But while you can live in both, you don't totally fit in either. So you can go back to Latin America, but you're now a US, or you can stay in the US, but you're a Latina. So there's a lot of tension happening there. And anyway, so that was a big insight for me, really made me realize who I was, and actually did make me change a lot of the ways I approach work and stuff like that, because I realized I was working so hard in fitting in and doing everything I needed for the more individualistic and, you know, cultural success that the US had. And I was letting go some of my roots and some of the togetherness and the stuff that we do as familia from being a Latin. So very
Or Latin and with your feet in two continents. It reminds me, Diana, a little bit of your heritage story. So what about you? What was your moment of Latinidad?
So I have plenty, but one that I've
ask you for one.
recently was a year ago when I became a mom. We, my husband and I had a really heated discussion about the name of our child. And he wanted like a very, you know, Latino name. And I started fighting about it. And I suddenly said, you know, I've read so many articles and statistics about how harder it is for people to get a job if you have a Hispanic sounding name or a Latino sounding name versus if you have an American US sounding name. So I was like, we're not gonna like put blocks on roadblocks on his life before he's even born. So we ended up deciding to name him Matias, but only because there's like the very American short for it, which is Matt. And so, and then I never realized that I had that, you know, that bias was so present until I had to name my son. And then, you know, after that, a lot of things also happened, which really, you know, were, you know, a bit hurtful, which is when he was born, he turned out to be this beautiful boy with blue eyes and really fair skin. So he wasn't lucky to get my tanned brown skin. And everybody that met him said, oh, that's so funny. People are gonna think you're the nanny, or oh, did you steal him from the hospital? And obviously they meant it as a joke, and I laughed, but you know, it's not that funny when you think about it. And so that's when I realized, like, wow, this is, you know, this is really something. And I moved here to the US recently, but he's gonna have to, you know, probably live his whole life here. So it's something that I personally want to change for him and for everybody, obviously.
These are powerful moments, and Diana, when you, and I invite our listeners to think about, have you had to think about what you're going to name your child because you wanted them to belong? You know, and we might, in the story that you talk about in terms of, are you the nanny? That could be a microaggression, and it's a slow drip, but over time that builds up. But I bet that you guys, instead of letting that halt you, and to Estrella's earlier point, you let affirmations propel you. How about shifting into a little bit of a micro affirmation? What are the actions that you take to propel your Latinidad forward? And what would you like to see others do to propel Latinidad in general forward, whether you're Latino or not? Javier.
Yes. Sorry.
Or Diana. Yeah,
no, I'll just loop it in with my previous story, because what happened with my son just made me even more Latina and more proud to be Latina. I actually spinned it off and took it the other way around. And so I said, now I have to become this advocate for Latinos and change that undetected attitude into something that's bold and present, and so that people know, yes, Latinos can be, essential workers or nannies, but they can also be CEOs. So that's why the one thing that my affirmation that I invite everybody to do is to be really bold and out there and advocate for Latinos.
So bold and advocating. So Javier, you're a micro affirmation.
So you guys had asked us to say it in one word, just in case.
Just in case.
I'll say the one word, but I'll speak up a little more. So my one word is unity. Unity. And where this comes from, at least for me, is so we all in the Latinx community, Latinos, Latinas, we need to start treating each other with the respect that we're seeking others outside of the Latino, Latina community to give us. And what I mean by that, it's we have that segregation of culture. So you have the Argentinian, so I'm Argentinian, but the typical Argentinian that doesn't get along with the typical Brazilian, or the Cuban that talks about the Puerto Rican. Those forms of discrimination that we do within ourselves, we need to work on bettering that in order for them to go outside and ask for the same respect from others. The only, the silver lining that I see on all of this is that, so I have a 14-year-old nephew, and at their age nowadays, it doesn't exist. So he has a gay friend, he has a black friend, he has a Cuban friend, and there's no, they're all the same. Like there's no, there's no discrimination. There's not that notion that we have, I think, maybe because we're older, that we have embedded in our head, and that it's harder maybe to get out of our heads. The good thing I think is that the new generation, it's not going through that, and hopefully it won't.
And so you would ask the new generation and the older generations, like the ones that Estrella and I come from, for what microaffirmation, Javier?
So I would ask myself included and everyone to give everyone the same respect that everyone deserves, and to stop that micro discrimination between us Latinos.
Powerful, powerful. So, fellow Gen Xer Estrella, your microaffirmation.
So it's kind of interesting because my word was the same as yours, Javier. But
so what's this generation thing then?
No, but my twist is you're not alone. Keep on trying. And the reason why I say this is P&G is actually a fantastic place, very, very supportive when it comes to multicultural affinity groups, helping each other and acknowledging those differences. Yet, I'll tell you, even then, it was not easy. I could see my mentors, like, they're here today. I'm so glad, like Neil Comber, Graciela Eleta, and love them dearly. But, they will leave the company with medals and scars. And it really, sometimes it was me still fighting my own battle and surviving and trying to succeed my own fight, even though I was in such a great community. And I'll tell you, now that I am outside of P&G, I miss that. Even though it was not total, it's even less outside of P&G. So the one thing that I learned is we are very smart people, every single one of us, okay? But in a way, as Latinos, we think we can solve it and do it on our own. Like if we just stand for truth, you need to do your things for yourself and stand by yourself on your own. But at the end of the day is how do we get the unity of all of us together and find it together? And how do we really start working smarter? So we're not just smart on our own, but we get the wisdom of the group and the power of the group to really make things happen. Because if not, I'll tell you, Marc had some great goals and numbers, but I agree, those numbers were the same when I was there, and they have not changed, so we need to keep on talking. We need to start thinking about how doing things differently and work together to get that wisdom.
Thank you, Estrella. And if we're here today, in part is because of those affinity groups. And I invite the audience to drop in the chat, as you've been doing, what are some of your ideas that might help the brave and bold affirmation that Diana shared with us, and the unity and respect that we all deserve that Javier called for, and Estrella reminding us that we're in all of this together. Vote, I'm seeing. And one of my micro affirmations is, we learned leadership in a best-in-class environment, P&G. Leadership, full stop. And as you heard Marc say, this is good for growth. This isn't just a bolt-on. This isn't just this month. So my call to action is use the leadership skills that we've learned to make a difference and be a power for growth wherever you are, and come back to the P&G alumni community when you need to sustain. So I so appreciate the stories of courage, corazón, vulnerability that you've shared with us here today. And may we continue to create the spaces where we have these conversations. And with that, I'm going to say gracias and pass it along to Gina, who's going to share a new kind of story that helps us understand and meet the moment.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Estrella, Diana, Javier, for your moments of humanity, for the dialogue that we will now continue. So we're continuing that story with what it means to be Latinx in America. And I am joined by a very special musical guest, Jay Patron. He is a Latino urbano recording artist. He's been showcased at South by Southwest and is out on Puro Records and labeled by the press as embodying the American dream. Jay Patron is based in the California desert, which most people reference with Coachella. Jay Patron, you told me your arrival in the States made you a man. Can you tell me?
Yes. First of all, thank you for having me. Hi, everybody. My name is Camilo Gomez. My artist name is Jay Patron. I was born in Bogota, Colombia. I migrated over here with my parents. I was 4 years old in the late 80s, 88. So yes, this story made me a man. Just put yourself in this situation. You're a 4-year-old kid. Your family tells you we're going to the US. Nos vamos para Estados Unidos. And you're like, ¿cuándo? Mañana, de una vez. Your cousins, your family members are prepping you. They're getting you mentally prepared, telling you if you're approached by a cop or somebody in uniform, don't tell them you were born in Colombia. Don't tell them you're from Bogota. Tell them you were born in LA. And I would ask why. And that's when I started understanding the whole migrating and borders and illegal and all this stuff. And I was like, okay, well, at least I'm ready. Let's go on this journey. It was about a 3-month journey. My father came first. My mother and I followed, but our journey was a little bit longer. My father came in through the Ronald Reagan Amnesty Act. So he became a legal resident, but it was a little difficult for my mother and I. We went to Mexico City. In Mexico City, we stayed there for 3 months, got to Tijuana. In Tijuana, we met up with my dad and the Coyote, and then we crossed the TJ border into San Diego and then LA, and then ended up in the Coachella Valley in the California desert. Now, this is the part that I would say made me a man at 4 years old. I started school, I started kindergarten the same week. I was in there and I'm like, okay, I was just a couple weeks ago, I was in Bogota with a bunch of kids speaking Spanish. Now everybody's speaking English and I felt really different. My mom had packed me some lunch and I was eating food and kids started making fun of me because of the stuff I was eating. And I felt really alone. I felt really different. Like, where am I? And then I noticed some other kids were speaking Spanish. So I started hanging around with them and asking them questions. And I realized like, yo, there's more Latinos, more Latinas here in the US. I am not alone. And once again, like I felt part of this community. Like, okay, it's like I'm in Bogota all over again, except I'm with my Mexicanos, with my Salvadoreños, Guatemaltecos, like other Latinos and Latinas. So that's what made me a man right there. Me being able to tell the difference. Okay, these kids that are making fun of me have no idea what I just went through, what I've been through, and what I am gonna go through. But I'm not gonna label them and make fun of them because they don't understand, you know? So that's how I matured.
And you've channeled much of your life into your music and your art. And so tell us about what we're about to see in terms of the significance of the video and the song.
Correct. This is Dia de mi Suerte. This piece was put together by a lot of different Latinx influences. I got some Mexican background in there, Day of the Dead for the whole art direction. The song was inspired by Puerto Rican, New York salsa, Willie Colon, Hector Lavoe. You know, my Colombian talk in there. So it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of everything. Created a little salsa right there. So hope you guys enjoy.
Beautiful. Let's roll it. Día de mi suerte. My lucky day.
Soy el parcero californio, colecciono monopolio. Obvio que las nenas buenas va a dejar su novio. El flow de oro, todo lo conocen por apodo. Yo sin un micrófono es un barrio sin un cholo. Vato loco, Califas calibra todo. Brindo vino tinto con sangre de Cristo Pinto. Brinco 5 edificios con un salto super giro. Sucio lo que brilla, brillo como un ladrillo de oro. Oro, como, regrésame el coro. Pacto con la luna como un hijo de puta lobo. Oro, como, regrésame el coro. Puro colombiano, somos como somos. Arepa, pan de bono, arroz con pollo. Medallas de primer lugar, ese es el rollo. Bogotá, rolo, agüita de coco. Agüita bendita para que le quite el coco. Oh no, tú no, mira mi rumbo. Entrevistas en Univisión, Telemundo. Sueño es profundo, puso ver el punto. Siendo que se cumpla y me pregunto ¿cuándo llegará? ¿Cuándo llegará? El día de mi suerte. Te lo juro por mi muerte. El día llegará. ¿Cuándo llegará? El día de mi suerte. Te lo juro. Que me toquen en la emisora. Rompo la rocola. Sonido por la calle que me inunda toda la zona. Botella Coca-Cola con muy poquita ropa. Y la persecución eterna al hijo de puta dólar. Que me toquen en la emisora. Rompo la rocola. Sonido por la calle que me inunda toda la zona. Botella Coca-Cola con muy poquita ropa. Y la persecución eterna al hijo de puta dólar. Chaqueta de oso polar. Bling bling mi joya. Mojarra frita en ajo con frijoles de la olla. Sexy, hola, grande, cola. Ponte pilas que te robo a tu novia. No la dejes sola, cállate la boca. Hablan pura mierda, la jeta le huele a cola. La vida no es fácil, todos tienen una historia. La mía es una película, así es como va mi historia. ¿Cuándo llegará? ¿Cuándo llegará? Vine a este país solo para triunfar. Mi sueño es profundo, busco ver el punto, haciendo que se cumpla. Y me pregunto ¿cuándo llegará? ¿Cuándo llegará? El día de mi suerte. Te lo juro por mi muerte. El día llegará. ¿Cuándo llegará? El día de mi suerte. Te lo juro.
So this is the part where we turn to the Latinx voter as a clear proxy for Latinx consumers. And first, we're going to pull up a poll and clear up any doubts about how many of us can actually vote. Poll is what % of US Latinx are US citizens versus passing through or permanent residents or undocumented. So Estrella, you want to take us through the results as you see them come through?
Let's let a few people come vote a little bit more. And actually, this one is coming pretty even. We have 66% is the top choice. And
but
then
the answer is?
The answer is actually 80%. 80% of US citizens or of US Latinos are US citizens.
Yeah, so there again, we need to update our knowledge on that one. And that, of course, is what makes up this undeniable impact from a political standpoint in this election. So we now have the honor of having the preeminent expert on Latinx political engagement on getting out the Latinx vote with us today. He's written the playbook on how to do it, no matter what side you're batting for. It's called Theo Bernie from his time as senior strategist on the presidential campaign. He's sharing it all, so there's no excuse not to win with the Latinx voter, consumer, user. He's a New York Times op-ed contributor and founder of Solidarity Strategies. With 18 days to go till Election Day, he is booked on the nonstop news and caucus circuit, and we have him here exclusively for P&G. Chuck Rocha, and I've asked him to start with his countries of origin.
Thank you, Gina. Thanks for being here. And man, I've been sitting here for a couple hours watching all of this, starting with Marc and then the rest of you folks. Like, this has been really, really inspirational. And I just want to thank you and take the time to say that I see all of you, amazing stories, amazing places, courage, moving stories, music. Anyway, I've been blown away, and I've really been glad that I've been able to sit here and listen to that. The Latino vote, the Latinx vote. What does that mean here in America? Well, let me start by telling you my story. Now, it starts with the funny way that I talk. That's just another. I feel like I'm the cavalcade of all the different Latino stories today because I sound like an old white man, like my grandfather, when I speak. I'm a third generation Texan. You probably couldn't have guessed that, but yes, I'm a third generation Texas. My family back in the day, that would have been my great grandfather, migrated from Guanajuato, Mexico. They came up through the valley. They came to Dallas, Fort Worth, settled in a little place called Kemp, Texas. I remember asking my Uncle Monty why our family was in Kemp, Texas. And they were like, well, that's where your grandfather was when he had enough money working on the railroad to buy the land. So that's where literally they were building the railroad. When he had saved enough, they went past a plot of land and bought that plot of land. Let me give you a little indication. You've heard a lot about people who vote, Latinos that vote, Latino populations. Let me give you an idea of Latinos, Latinx, Hispanics. First of all, we can't even agree all on a name because we come from so many different countries of origins. We're such a melting pot, like this beautiful thing, right? Wait, over there. Oh my God, this thing here is beautiful. Of all the different countries, all the different flags, all the different races, all the different colors of our skin make the melting pot of the Latino, the Hispanic, the Latinx voter. So as you heard earlier, there's lots of Latinos in America, and I myself refer to the whole block as Latino. You may think of Hispanics, but I want to let you know that I mean no disrespect when I say Latino. I'm just going to do that so we have a common term that I use in Latinx in America, understanding that. I went back and pulled up some numbers. In 2016, 12.7 Latinos voted in America. 12 million, just over 12.5 million voted in America. 14 million eligible Latinos who could have voted did not vote. Well, how does that stack up compared to the other races in America? So it starts at the top with white people. Why do white people always got to be on top? Anyway, 65% of all white people, Anglos, voted in the last presidential election in 2016. Next were African Americans. Black voters voted at almost 60% in the last election. Next were Asian Americans, and they voted at 49%. And Latinos, bringing up the rear, 47.6% of us voted in the last presidential elections. And there's a lot of reasons why that is. There's lots of experts who say that Latinos don't vote. I actually just wrote a book called Theo Bernie to show you that Latinos will vote if you'll actually go ask them to vote. The biggest reason that we underperform when it comes to voting is our age. We're just a younger demographic. We haven't been here as long. We're younger as a demographic. We're 10 years younger than the average white or black voter who votes. So as you get down lower on the demographic scale of age, we just don't vote as frequently. And then when we don't vote as frequently, we're not considered a prime voter. And if you're not considered a prime voter, they don't talk to you. So one kind of leads into the other, if that helps you understand why we don't vote. Let me talk about the playbook on how you go and get Latinos to vote. Now, a lot of you will think that because I ran Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign, that seems awful weird that we'd be looking at this old white guy who's a senator from Vermont, who's a Democratic socialist, who's 76 years old, as the next coming of Cesar Chavez, and why he blew everybody out of the water when it came to the Latino vote in the primary. Well, there's a reason behind that. It's because I was a general consultant to that campaign and got to run the overall campaign. Sure, I get lots of credit, and I'm humbled by the credit that I get of being the architect of the Latino vote. This is my 31st year. I'm already getting warm. It's my I just cut my hair this morning too. It's my 31st year working in campaigns. And every year I've seen one campaign after another get this part wrong. And this part wrong is they don't talk to our community early enough, often enough, and with what I love to call cultural competency. You know, Marc brought up something earlier about the diversity of P&G and what they have been working on, and that it's not good enough, and they continue to get better, and they're proud of what they've accomplished. Well, he would be proud to know, Marc would be, that he is lights and shoulders, head and shoulders, let's say head and shoulders above the political movement, because we are way behind corporate America. We're way behind progressive movements. We're way behind lots of things when it comes to representation of politics and Latinos in politics. And what that means is that there's a whole lot of white people, and in my world, a whole lot of woke white people trying to run campaigns to a community that they know nothing about. They don't understand that 65% of our community is Mexican. The other part is mixed between Cubans, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, like people from all over, from El Salvador, and all of these. And some of us just got here, and some of us, like me, have been here for multiple generations. But on the voter file, when we talk to people, we're all the Latino voters. And what we did with Bernie is we started early in language, talking to Latinos, and it started with Bernie's immigration story and his father coming here as a young man who couldn't speak English and had no money. Record scratch, urge. That's my grandfather's story. That's my grandmother's story. That's your abuela's story. That's your tio's story. Like, we all can talk about the immigration story of somebody in our family. My God, I've been sitting here for 2 hours listening to everybody's immigration story. It's what drives us together. Look at that. Ain't that cool? It's what drives us together. It's what brings us together, along with music, along with food, and along with our family. Another big thing that politicians get wrong with Latinos is they think that if they can show up in the last few weeks before a campaign, they take their best English language TV commercial, Google translate it into Spanish, and put it on Univision. They have checked the box of doing Latino outreach, which couldn't be further from the truth. My name is Charles Rocha. I'm 50 years old. I live in Washington, D.C. I come home from work every day before COVID, and I sit in front of a 72-inch TV. I'd watch a baseball game, MSNBC, CNN, while scrolling my Facebook, seeing what pictures my mama put up this week of me when I was a baby. And that's how I consume information. Well, my son, who lives in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, is also Charles Rocha. He's got two twin, beautiful, breathtaking grandbabies of mine named Rowan and Wyatt Rocha. And on the voter file, guess what? He's a Latino just like his daddy's a Latino in another state. But that boy don't even got cable on his TV at home, and they watch Netflix, and somehow they watch TV and movies through his gaming system, which I don't even understand how that works. But the deal here is that neither one of us are watching Univision in the evening. Neither one of us are consuming information the same. And our politics hasn't changed to those nuances. Now, a lot of you are thinking that's crazy. There's no way people actually do that. There really is. Let me give you an example on just the Democratic side of things. As of 7/31, when the last FEC reports come out, the white-led super PACs that focused on white voters for the Democrats had raised $500 million. Today, as of today, they've almost raised $1 billion that they're using to communicate to white persuadable voters. Over that same time period, the three leading Latino super PACs, and I run one of those called Nuestro PAC, had raised about $8 million. So the disparity is the difference between $1 billion and just under $10 million. Can you imagine why Latinos may underperform a little bit? Because we're not having a conversation with them. And then when we do, we show up at the last minute and we don't have any cultural competency. We treat Cubans like we do Mexicans and Puerto Ricans like we do Dominicans. And you can see how that would be, disrespectful to that community. Let's pivot to the Latin vote, the Latinx votes psyche. The biggest tipping points for this presidential election will be around the Latinx vote, and it will be in states like Arizona and Florida, North Carolina, Pennsylvania. People don't realize, we realize, you probably realize that one of the largest migrations of Latinos in the last 2 years have been people moving from a beautiful island called Puerto Rico. And over 150,000 of them have moved to a little state called Pennsylvania. Yes, a ton of them have moved to Orlando and in the I-4 corridor, of course, right? But we have to keep pace with having a conversation with these people. I wrote some notes down to tell you one other interesting statistic. Cubans and Puerto Ricans primarily live in Florida. And in Florida, you couldn't be more diverse from the countries of origins, where you have Cubans who are very conservative, Puerto Ricans who are more liberal. You have Venezuelans who've just moved here from a horrible situation they were living down there. You have Mexicans who've moved there to pick produce and tomatoes way back in the day, who now their second generations of kids are coming of age. You have all of these other cultures that are blended together just in one state, that is in Florida. And just for example, in Florida, Cubans, right now, polling that was done about 2 weeks ago, Cubans in Florida are supporting Donald Trump at 54%. Just up the street, where most of the Puerto Ricans live, have the difference of 54% to 23%. That means that they're acting just the opposite of each other, and they're both Latino, they're both Hispanic, they're both Latinx on the voter file, and you literally could get in a car and within 3 hours being the heart of both of those communities, and they vote totally backwards. But on the voter file, they both say Latino, hence the nuances of our community. Another thing is messaging, and when you're talking to Latinos, most people, white consultants think, woke white consultants think a lot of times, that you just talk to Latinos about immigration and about the border and about all of that things, Donald Trump saying this, Joe Biden saying that, to keep this nonpartisan. But immigration is not a top three, most of the time not a top 5 issues for voters in America, Latino voters in America. Is it an important issue? Absolutely. Is it an emotional issue? Absolutely. Do a lot of times Democrat and Republican people use that differently? Of course they do. And it's just not a reason why Latinos say that they go vote. Is it important to them to hear the personal narrative and hear the stories? Absolutely it is. You have huge states like Texas, where there's been no real investment in talking to Latinos. And 1 in 2 school children in Texas are kids of color, and primarily Latinos. You just have this melting pot of all these different kind of cultures that are coming together that make up the Latino vote. When you have Central Americans, South Americans, Caribbeans, all of these Latinos that are showing up in America, one thing they have in common is they're all coming from states where voting may not be as easy and accessible as it is in America. So there is an intimidation factor as well. Again, why Latinos underperform. With Bernie, we took the targeting and went from just the prime Latino voters to targeting non-prime voters and infrequent voters and newly registered voters. And that was a big part of our success. I continue to do that today with my super PAC, Nuestro PAC. Another thing is when you get into the community, it's really important that you hire people from that community. Before COVID hit and when we could actually knock on doors, it was good if you would be there, and when you show up at the door, be from that community and talk about that community. We did that with Bernie, where we hired over 200 Latinos. And then we would put together culturally competent events on the ground, like soccer tournaments, like putting together swap meets, and all of these activities that bring Latinos together, and things that are things that people know, that they understand and that they like, and see a campaign or a politician doing that is kind of a gesture to that community that we're serious about taking your vote serious. The very first office we opened in Nevada was in East Las Vegas, which is in the heart of the Latino community. So what that tells the community is that we're here, and we're not showing up in the last 3 weeks or the last month. Heck, we opened up that office 8 months before the caucuses in Nevada. And I think that was a big part. Let me wrap up by saying this, and I may have a few times for some questions, is that the Latino community will continue to grow in a big way. And they'll become not just like multidimensional, but multiracial. Like my little beautiful grandkids are as white as the driven snow because my son's baby mama is a white woman. And he's raising these kids now like I raised him. And I make them call me abuelo. So they know that they're Latino, so they're proud of their heritage. My mom and my dad, when came up, my dad, like many of the stories we've heard today, was discouraged from speaking Spanish. And you didn't really talk about that. And you try to take white names and all of the things that we've talked about. I've lived all that. It was very touching for me to hear those stories. But we're becoming very, very mixed as these kids come of age, all these kids. So it's different. And we're going to be changing, and the country is going to change as we move along. And the biggest change will be in the leadership of all of these parties, where these 60 and 70 and 80-year-old white men and white women will be leaving, and there'll be more of a chance for more Latinos to have a voice. The number one thing we see in Latino focus groups these days are Latinos that tell me, Chuck, I want to know what a politician is going to do to make my life better right now. And that's really the basis of what they want to hear. But you can't show up, if I was to summarize, in the last few weeks and think that that's good enough. And Gina, I think I'll wrap up my comments there to see if there's any questions from anybody.
So first I'm going to ask you to talk about Walter. So we're going to go ahead and throw this up on the screen, going back to cultural competency. And you tell us what this is about.
We work for a nonprofit in North Carolina called NC Poder. And NC Poder wanted to send, this is their first mailer that told Latinos how to register to vote, where to register to vote, and then where they would go vote early. And this was just the front of the mail piece. And anybody, now I know, and I don't want to hear it like I've heard it before. Yes, Walter is Boricua. He is Puerto Rican, like he's all of those things. But every Mexican who ever watched Univision every night knew Walter Mercado. And you would get slapped in the face if you was talking while Walter was coming on TV to tell you about your horoscope for that day. So it was a big deal to put him on the front, mail it to everybody to catch everybody's attention. And then on the back, start having a conversation about registering, voting early. This didn't happen in the last week. I mailed this thing 2 months ago. And this is just a hat tip to the culture of things that are happening in a community like North Carolina. Would this work everywhere? Probably not. It works where it needed to work in North Carolina because of the demographics. And this is just one example of cultural competency, of understanding the community, understanding icons in the community. It's one of the things I always warn people about who are starting out doing Latino outreach is that you don't show up in Little Havana with a mariachi band and a taco truck. Like, that's not the same kind of Latino.
And so on the note of cultural competency or incompetency, I'm curious if you have any anecdotes to share from our current 2020 election as to who's being competent and who's being incompetent.
Well, I think that people would be surprised to say that Donald Trump has been very smart. A lot of people like me who disagree with Donald Trump's politics and the way that he's been, my personal opinion, with Latinos, he was very wise to when Joe Biden won the primary and then didn't have any money till he had to build back up his money. Donald Trump went on the air in Spanish to talk to our community about why Donald Trump thought Joe Biden was bad. He wasn't talking about how great he had been for the community. He didn't really have a leg to stand on, in my opinion. But he went on to talk about how bad Joe Biden is. And then Joe Biden caught up and now has outpaced him almost 3-1, but it's been late. So what that means to people in America is when you see people on TV, even me on TV, say Joe Biden is soft with the Latino vote, that means his numbers aren't as good as Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama. It's because he got a late start because of COVID, a late start because he didn't have any money. And then also, Donald Trump wisely has not taken this group for granted and now is actually performing better than Barack Obama and a lot of the other races. He's not performing as good as Barack Obama did, but the number disparages there, better than John McCain and the other Republicans that have run, and that's smart.
Yeah, and actually, can you also share the story, speaking of the different ethnicities and countries of origin, one of the ones that a lot of people want to understand better is the Cuban vote in Florida and how it changes from one generation to the other, as well as how entrenched it is in some very real history as to where that's coming from. So could you share a little texture on that?
Yep. And first thing is, you're always going to hear that Cubans are only Latinos in Florida and that Cubans dominate Florida and nobody can do anything there except the Cubans. Well, that's a lie. Let me give you the real numbers of how many Cubans actually live in Florida, voting age Cubans. There's 930,000 Cubans voting age in the state of Florida, almost 1 million. But you would be shocked to know that there are 875,000 Puerto Ricans that are voting age as well in Florida. And the Cubans came from an island. They lived under a communist socialist dictator. There's so many horrible things I can say that's happened to this Cuban community, right? And they were forced to come here. They fled, their boats, all the things, and you can read your own history. But I will admit that what they've lived through is crazy and it's horrible. And so they have a very strong belief, and they're very much conservative, especially older Latinos who lived through that experience. But now there are second and third generation Cubans who act much different, almost diametrically opposed to those 70, 80, and 90-year-old Cubans that were born on the island. So much so that if you took an age between the ages of 18 when you registered to vote to, let's just say, 100, if you talk to a 90-year-old Cuban, they're almost 100% guaranteed, this is proven, this is not speculation, that they are Republican. And I can show you on a voter file. I can pull you every Cuban down there that's 90 and above and show you that they all vote in every Republican primary. Cubans that are 18 are the polar opposite. They're almost 99% Democratic or no party preference, but they're not Republicans. And as you climb that scale from 18 to 20 to 30s to 40s, you become more and more Republican as you get older, till when you get to around 40, it's almost 50-50. 50% are Republican, 50% are Democrat, just because of the age, right? And some of it's due to where they live at, around monies that they've raised. But that's kind of the big misnomer that people don't understand. And when people step to me and say, well, Chuck, you work for this socialist and there's no way that that's causing Joe Biden. And Joe Biden, the only people who really care about that are Cubans who are already registered as Republicans and already voting for Donald Trump. Like what you see on TV, I like to remind people, are people talking who's never really run a campaign, but they like to talk about campaigns. But I digress because I can go down a rabbit hole there.
So I have a quick fun one. People want to know if you were the one responsible for getting Bernie the early support of Cardi B.
I might have played a small role into that. And in my brain, I like to think that I played a much bigger role in that. But look, T.O. Bernie is cool cat. And like everybody wanted to be around Bernie. And Cardi, I was with Cardi and with Bernie at the nail salon. I think it was in Michigan at the debate when they met. And I got to meet her and I was fangirling in a big way.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Chuck. Respect the community, start early, be where they consume media. Hire and spend with the community. That's the proven formula where you got 70% of the Latinx vote out there. So imagine the application and potential outcome with consumers and users. Thank you for revealing all of that. The truth is that there's a lot to soak up when it comes to our deep-seated history as a voter. And the transparency is totally appreciated, because what we want to do is win with courting the Latinx community with respect. So the tell-all book is Theo Bernie. Thank you, Chuck. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. Well, now we're going to shift gears, and we've got one more musical guest and before we close. So speaking of respecting the entire community, our next very special guest represents a quarter of the Latinx community that identifies as Afro-Latinx. Lauren Henderson is a jazz singer, songwriter. She's the founder of her own record company, Brontosaurus Records, and has toured all over Europe, plus South Africa and Mexico. And she's here to tell us about her defining moment of Latinidad. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here. And thank you, Chuck, for that informative lesson. It's incredible to hear everything, and really important as we get out to vote. I was born in Marblehead, Massachusetts, which isn't particularly known for diversity, but it's important in my identity story because it's a part of my journey in discovering who I am and as a member of the Latinx community. My maternal grandfather was born in Panama and worked on the Panama Canal. He came to the United States by way of Ellis Island in the 1930s. And my maternal grandmother was born in the Caribbean. So my grandparents met in the United States and they had my mom. My father's family, my parents actually recently celebrated their anniversary. So I just like to share that as well, fun fact. My father's family has been in the US for centuries, and we are the descendants of enslaved peoples as well as enslavers. And so discovering my Latinidad throughout my experience is really centered around colorism, which we've already discussed. And again, it was really powerful to hear everybody's stories and how that's influenced them. For me, it's really skating the line between never being considered Black enough in certain scenarios, especially as a professional jazz musician, having people question if I can sing Black enough, which promotes very dangerous bias and stereotypes. And then on the other side, never feeling like I'm Latinx enough to fit into the community. People asking me, ¿por qué hablas español? For obvious reasons, because of my skin tone or because of, again, dangerous and harmful stereotypes and biases in the community. And then as I progressed in New York City and toured around the world, I realized how marketing plays a role in colorism, which I think it's so important that P&G is talking about this as far as representing all different types of people and really putting that forward. So as a musician, as an artist, I am a product in a way, but I don't always fit in a clear box. And so it's imperative that we promote positive images in the industry. And I've noticed that depending on what venues or promoters are trying to portray to an audience, they'll sometimes favor pictures, whether my hair is straight or curly, or how I'm represented and how that's viewed in society. And so I just really want to break down these barriers and be sure that they're challenged and that all of us are represented within the community. And so I have some music to share with you, and Gina is going to share the significance. And it's a song that I wrote with another incredible musician, and the lyrics are by me in Spanish, and Gina, take it away. But
well, what I love about it is this is actually a quarantine recording. So many folks are probably wondering, what are artists doing during this whole pandemic, given that at least 2/3 of them have lost their ability to make money. They're unemployed. So if you can't perform, right, which in this day and age, we can't go to any venues and see anything. So it's awesome to see what you guys pulled together. You mentioned this was a self-reflection and introspective on identity, the song that you wrote and that you play called Alma Oscuda. So let's go ahead and take it away.
Dime la respuesta, a ver si contestas, alma oscura. Tanto tiempo perdí los demonios en mí, alma oscura. Todos días tengo el mismo miedo a corromper mi corazón. Dime la respuesta, a ver si contestas, alma oscura. Frenética, buscando, intentando a volver a encontrar mi corazón. Yo encerrada, ahogando en este océano profundo. Dime la respuesta, a ver si contestas, alma oscura. Dime la respuesta, a ver si contestas, alma oscura. Dime la respuesta, a ver si contestas, alma oscura.
And with that, we've come to the end of our time together for now, this once-a-year pause for Latinx Heritage Month. We do have one more message we want to leave with you. We hope that, as is the mission of this alumni network, that you've been engaged, that you've been enriched. There's one more leg, and that is philanthropy in terms of the mission. And so I want to leave a minute here for the good work of our alumni that is being carried out with the Latinx community to be touched upon. And I've got a guest here, Eleazar, who's going to share a word on the Alumni Foundation before we wrap it up. Eleazar?
Yes. Thank you, Gina. It's great to be here with all of you this evening. My name is Eleazar Contreras. I serve as an ambassador to the P&G Alumni Foundation. Many of you knew my mother, Sharon Cunliffe, a P&G alum in heaven who worked with Marc Pritchard and Deb Kilty, chairman of the P&G Alumni Foundation Board. As an ambassador, I've been asked to give a brief PSA regarding the foundation, and here it is. Our focus is to provide marginalized people with economic paths to integrity through jobs, business trainings, and more. Our 88 grant awards to date have now totaled over $1.3 million, with grants ranging from $5,000 to $25,000 each. Our secret ingredient is the P&G Alumni Multiplier Effect. As donors, grant champions, committee members, ambassadors, and more. One of our grants went to Hispanics Avanzando Hispanics in Cincinnati with Alfonso Cornejo as the grant champion, providing micro enterprise loans and financial literacy training to Hispanic entrepreneurs. 17 of our grants have gone to nonprofits supporting Latinx communities across the Americas. I urge you to become involved with us. Sign up as an ambassador at pgalumnifoundation.org and help spread the word. Become a donor knowing that every dollar is multiplied with P&G talent, and apply for a grant serving the Latinx community where one or more P&G alums are actively involved. In closing, the P&G Alumni Foundation is excited to partner with all of you. For more information, go to pgalumnifoundation.org. Gracias por su atención. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eleazar. Thank you for the good work of the P&G Alumni Foundation. And so now we close. I want to thank our P&G alumni panelists and guests, Marc, Beatriz, Javier, Diana, Lauren, J. Patron, and Chuck, for the gift of your story in the Latinx mosaic and the micro and the macro affirming calls to action. Thank you to my P&G BFFs, Sandra and Estrella, for supporting the mission. Thank you to the Global Network and California, NYC, South Florida, Chicago, Boston, Baltimore, Texas chapters for the network collaboration. And finally, thank you to you all for carrying the personal and collective mission forward to step up and step in. Like the courageous stories of our family arrivals, encourage the people that surround you to vote, to hire and to wire, to create and to spend with the community, to be informed and influential in meeting the moment of making this nation a more perfect union, where we all go from surviving to belonging to thriving, where a foreign accent is a sign of bravery. Because if not now, when? So grab a drink and join us for more engagement, mission, Alumni Network mission, in the after party for a few rounds of breakouts and comedy to meet more of you beautiful people. You can find the link in your invite or in the chat. It's being dropped now. It's being led by our California chapter. And you know, they bring chill to the party every time. Go forward and be presente and sin pena. Thank you, gracias, obrigada, merci.